All right, let's get right into it. For the last, 30 years or so, we've all been living by this one simple economic idea. The world is just going to get bigger, richer, and more connected. But if you've been feeling like that entire rulebook has been thrown out the window lately, well, you're not wrong. We are entering a brand new era, what we're calling the Great Divergence, and this is your playbook for it. You know, this quote just nails it. The whole era of globalization, of baking this one giant, ever-growing economic cake for the entire world to share, that's over. Now, the fight is on. It is a fight between countries, between giant companies, and, even between us as individuals, over who gets the biggest slice of a cake that has pretty much stopped growing.
It's that shaky feeling, right? Prices are higher, new conflicts are popping up. There's just this sense that the old rules don't apply anymore. We're going to figure out why. Think of this as a kind of detective story. And our very first clue, it's hiding 30 years in the past.
To understand where we're headed, we have to go back. We have to look at Japan's past. Because what happened there back in the 1990s wasn't just some local crisis. No, it was a blueprint. A blueprint for a really strange economic disease that's making a comeback today, but this time on a global scale.
Look at this number, 38,915. So what is that? That was the absolute peak of Japan's Nikkei stock index, right back in 1989. The bubble was so gigantic, so completely insane, that the tiny patch of land under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was supposedly worth more than all of California. Just think about that. This wasn't just a boom, it was a nationwide mania.
So how on earth did it all come crashing down? Well, this timeline kind of gives you the anatomy of the disaster. It really kicked off in '85 with something called the Plaza Accord, which, long story short, flooded Japan with super cheap money and inflated this historic bubble. Then the government slammed on the brakes, the stock market tanked, and real estate followed right behind it. But here's the crucial part. The pain didn't end. It just went on and on for decades.
And this right here is the central mystery of the whole story. The government did what every Economics 101 textbook tells you to do. They slashed interest rates all the way to zero to try and get people borrowing and spending again. But it didn't work. The economy just stayed frozen. For decades. Why? This is the big aha moment. An economist named Richard Koo figured it out. He called it a balance sheet recession. Now, here's what that means in plain English. After the crash, basically everyone, from huge corporations down to regular families, was underwater. Their assets, their stocks, their homes, had collapsed in value, but their debts were still there. So their goal wasn't profit anymore, it was just survival.
And this single-minded focus on survival created this awful vicious cycle. See, when everyone is just paying down old debt, nobody is taking out new loans, nobody's spending, nobody's investing. The entire economy just grinds to a halt. And this lack of demand forces prices to fall, which actually makes the debt you still have feel even heavier. That is the deflationary trap, and it held Japan in its grip for nearly 30 years.
Okay, now, let's fast forward to today. Remember that 30-year-old blueprint from Japan? Well, a chilling echo of that exact same pattern is now showing up in the world's second-largest economy, China.
Now, the trigger this time is a little different. It's a massive real estate crisis, not a stock market crash, but the underlying sickness is exactly the same. After decades of building on a mountain of debt, China's property bubble has finally burst, and now the country is showing all the classic symptoms of that same Japanese-style balance sheet recession.
But here's the thing. While the disease might be the same, the patient is very different. Look at the key distinctions here. In China, the debt was driven by the state, not private companies, and its government is super centralized, so it can react way faster than Japan's ever could. But the biggest, most critical difference is the world around them. Japan's crisis happened when globalization was taking off, which gave them a way out. China is facing this crisis as the world is actively pulling apart.
But even with all those differences, the fundamental engine of the crisis is identical. You have an entire society that is shifting its mindset away from borrowing to build a bigger future and toward desperately paying for the mistakes of the past. And that collective scramble to get out of debt just crushes demand and creates this massive economy-wide deflationary force.
So what happens when the world's factories suddenly catches a massive deflationary cold? Well, it tries to export it. It tries to sell its problems to the rest of us. And that is creating this profound split across the globe. The Great Divergence has arrived. This chart really shows you the core conflict perfectly. In one corner, you've got the West, led by the US, fighting what they call sticky inflation. That's the kind that's driven by wages and services, and it's really hard to get rid of. And in the other corner, you have the East, led by China, where weak demand at home and way too many factories are creating intense deflationary pressure.
These two worlds are now in a tug-of-war, pulling the global economy in opposite directions. The West needs to keep interest rates higher to cool things down. The East needs to ship its extra stuff out at lower and lower prices just to keep its factories from shutting down. So China's cheap goods push prices down in the West, which makes the whole fight against inflation way more complicated. It's a global economic standoff.
And this whole economic clash is being cranked up to 11 by a huge shift in how world leaders think. For 30 years, the goal was simple: efficiency. Find the absolute cheapest place on the planet to make something. But after the pandemic and all the geopolitical shocks, the new goal is security. Countries want to be in control of their own supply chains.
This shift changes absolutely everything. Supply chains are being rewired through something called friendshoring. Basically, you only trade with your allies. Trade wars aren't just about money anymore. They're about national security. And all of this leads to one single inevitable conclusion. A world built for security instead of efficiency is a world that is just structurally more expensive for all of us.
Okay, so that's the massive bird's eye view. A divided world, a global tug of war. And, understanding these huge forces is one thing, but actually navigating them is something else entirely. So let's get to the most important question. What does all this mean for you? What's the playbook for this new era?
First things first, we have to accept that the old playbook is totally broken. The world of super low inflation, rock-bottom interest rates, and stock markets that only seem to go up, that's over. Just relying on cheap debt and passively throwing money into an index fund probably isn't going to cut it anymore. We need a new strategy, a more active one.
So this new strategy really boils down to 3 key steps. Step 1 is all about your skills. You need what you might call anti-fragile skills, things that actually get stronger in chaotic times. Think about high-skill trades that we need to rebuild supply chains, or roles where you are telling an AI what to do, not being replaced by one. Step 2, cash flow is king. A stable income and low debt are your personal fortress. And third, own some real stuff. In a world with more inflation, physical assets that can't just be printed, they hold their value.
This right here is the bottom line. Really, forget about chasing crazy, speculative gains. In this new world of higher costs and slower growth, the single most important factor for your personal security is the strength and stability of your own income and savings. Your cash flow, that is your fortress.
But that's the defensive move. There's also a more advanced, maybe more offensive strategy. What if, instead of just hunkering down inside one country's fortress, you could actually take advantage of the cracks that are opening up between them?
This is the so-called digital nomad strategy. It is the ultimate personal arbitrage play on this great divergence. You position yourself to earn a strong currency, like dollars or euros, from the high-cost, high-inflation West. But you live and spend your money in the lower-cost, higher-growth parts of the world. Think Southeast Asia or Latin America. You are literally turning the global divide into your personal profit.
And that really brings us to the final question you have to ask yourself. In a world that is busy building new economic walls, what's your strategy going to be? Are you going to build a solid financial fortress and try to stay safe inside one system? Or are you going to become a bridge and find your opportunity in the friction between those systems? The choice you make could very well define your next decade.